So first, let me say welcome to week 5 of the Every Bits Counts challenge. I cannot believe it has been 5 weeks, although as you could tell from my thumbnail, I can. I am totally burnt out, and part of that is just because I not only do the veg and the preserving and all of that stuff, but I also grow flowers and sell cut flower bouquets and have been working on starting a farm stand. And a lot of what I planted this year was keeping in mind that the farm stand was going to be open, and unfortunately I don't think it's going to happen this year. We got to start on it. I might put in a couple of pictures of that. But just the cost of materials, and we have some other things going on that are kind of taking our resources at this point. So the goal is to get monetized on this channel so that I can help offset some of the costs of the things that I need to do that are related to my whole farming operation here. But I'm hitting that end of August burnout where you have just processed and processed and processed and picked and picked and picked. And I'm at the point where I am giving tons of stuff to friends and family because I just can't. And I haven't even picked my peppers yet, and they are loaded. I probably am going to have to pick a whole bunch, can them, and then give a whole bunch away. So thanks for joining me this week. Let's get into everything that we have done this week. Yes, I'm doing my intro at the end of the week. That's just how my week has been. So thanks for being here, and let's get started. So we started the week off out at my mom's, and this is a bay tree. Yes, like bay leaves that you use in cooking. And these are the neighbor's goats, thinking I'm going to give them a snack. But today I was there focused on getting these bay leaves. And my grandmother planted this tree when I was probably about 10, and I didn't even know what it was until I was in my later 20s. And since then, I've always tried to get out there and get some. Now, my mom and I got to talking, and we discovered that this time of year is actually the good time of year to try to make starts of bay trees. So I'm going to pick off these lower leaves, and I will dehydrate those. And then I'm going to take my clippers and I'm going to snip by where one of the leaf nodes came out. And then once I get that cut, I need to dip it in some water. And then after I get the stem of it dampened, then I'm going to dip it in rooting hormone. And if you've never done this before, you just want to dip it in there and then tap the excess off. It doesn't have to be super thick. And then I have these little chopsticks, and I am going to make holes so that I can get them tucked down in here without scraping most of the powder off. And then once I do that, I will get the dirt tucked back around it. And I did 3 of those, and in the background, that is mock orange that was also from my grandmother's that I'm working on getting started. So I miss these every few days to keep them going. So I'm just sitting down outside on the patio. Luckily, the weather wasn't too awfully hot this day, and I am working on snipping all of the leaves off of the branch. Now, I could just hang these branches upside down somewhere in the house, and that would work fine, but my dehydrator happened to be empty this day, so I am going to just put them in the dehydrator and bring the dehydrator out on the deck so I'm not heating up the house. But first, I wanted to bring them into the house and get them all rinsed because there really was a lot of I guess field dirt, atmosphere dirt on these leaves. All rinsed, I put them in a couple different strainers and I let them mostly air dry. It's not really a problem putting them on the dehydrator if they're a little damp because they will dry. But this is what they looked like when I got them all stacked in there, and all of the leaves that I had did not fit in one batch. I ended up having to do 2 batches. And when they were done, this is what they looked like. I didn't have the dehydrator any hotter than 110, but some of the leaves turned a little bit on the browner side, but no worries, doesn't make any difference. They'll still flavor all of my soups, sauces, and stews just fine. Or you can also use bay leaves when you're storing like rice to keep pests out. Now, the next morning I got up and I harvested a whole bunch of gomphrena, and I didn't have the camera with me that morning because it was already 70 some degrees and I was sweating. But you can see this stem, how it's really stiff when you wiggle it. The flower head doesn't wiggle, and this one just wobbles all over the place. Now, if you were using these for fresh cut flowers, the one that wobbles is an immature bloom. It's not quite ready, and they tend to just wilt. They don't stand up very well. A little bit further along, they can rehydrate themselves and work well. But so just know that if you're ever doing gomphrena for that reason, the stiffer the flower, the longer they last. Now I am using these because I'm not sure if you knew this or not, but gomphrena has medicinal uses, and it is known for its anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, and anti-arthritic properties. And I am working on getting an apothecary. I don't have it yet, but when I do, I'll be sure to show you that. But a lot of the things that have been known to be used alongside with gomphrena is uses for respiratory health, inflammation, for arthritis, cardiovascular, urinary health, and gastrointestinal health. And you can use I believe you can use the leaves, but mostly you use the flower heads and just infuse them into a tea, which I will show you a little bit later. But on some of these where the stems are shorter or the flowers are really immature, I am just snipping off the heads, and you can see I'm making a little pile here on the table, and I will dry those separate. Now this is what it looks like when I got all of the long stems, the medium stems, and just the little heads done. And I am going to take the shorter stems into the house and dry them and see how wobbly they are. If I were to put these in a bucket of water, they would not stand up straight ever. So drying these immediately without rehydrating them is pretty much the best option. And I put a rubber band around quite a few of them because the stems can be really brittle and snap. And then I wind the rubber band around real tight, tuck it back in, and then I just make these little hooks out of wire for how I hang my flowers. And then I will take these little bunches, and I have a specific place that I dry flowers, but for now I'm just hanging them up here on my little bell. And here is a bunch that's been dried previously, and you can see how they were floppy just like the ones we hung up, but they're nice and stiff now, and you can use those for crafting. And here are the heads. I use basically like a cookie cooling rack and put them on there, and when they're done I put them in this cute little jar, which again will eventually go into my apothecary, and I just think they look so pretty in a jar. And then once I want to have some tea, I put them into an infuser, and this is a rather large infuser, and you'll see that it takes up most of the room inside of my cup. But I'm just going to let this sit and steep for about 3 to 5 minutes, and I do periodically come around and wiggle it up and down to get the juices moving in there. But it kind of has a very, very light amber tone to it when it's done. And I'm going to take just like a little, this is like a iced teaspoon full of honey, and I am going to mix that in. And the flavor I could best describe as kind of a earthy floral flavor, and I think in the fall I would put some cinnamon and clove in it too. Now the next day I moved on to the Bartlett pears that you saw in last week's video. A whole bunch of them were ripe, and so I thought I would just can them up. Now I have my canner going to get the water hot, and then I was making my simple syrup. And now I'm going to start working on the pears, and you can see that these are organic. I mean, not certified organic, but there is no spray involved at my mom's house. She just lets nature do its thing, and you can see some of them have blemishes, some of them have little wormy holes. And so I'm just going to pull the stems out, and then this peeler, I absolutely love it, but it is wicked sharp, and so I have to be very careful and just work my way around the whole pear. Again, slowly. This is not one of my favorite jobs because pears are very slimy, and it just feels like you're constantly wanting to have the pear slip out of your hands every time you're doing it. But as soon as I get it all peeled, and you can see those little spots right there, the peeler doesn't like to go over them too well. They kind of have a tougher texture to them when they're organic. And then I always snip off the very tip because it tends to get a little bit mushy. Cut them in half, and luckily this pear did not have a little wiggly friend inside of it, so I was pleased about that. And then this is my old melon baller. I absolutely love vintage kitchen stuff, and I scour garage sales and thrift markets, and I found this one at one of those two places, and it is still one of the things that I use every year when I work on preserving. So I'm just scraping down the stem core and getting out the seeds. And on this particular pear, the base of it, I didn't get it split evenly in half, so I just had to take a little knife and cut that out. But you can see there's like a little tiny, where I cut that out right there, see how tough it is? It still doesn't want to come out with the knife. So I'm just going to slice that out with my knife because I'm not sure if something tried to get in there or if it got poked by something, but These Bartlett pears, for some reason, whenever they have a worm in them and then the worm makes its little exit hole out the side or they get poked, the flesh of the inside of the pear gets really tough in those spots and I have to physically cut it out. It doesn't make a pleasant texture when they're canned. And right here, even though I didn't see a worm in the center of this pear, this little exit hole here, it kind of made it look like there was one. So I just cut it out. There's no chance of it being anywhere else, so it doesn't bother me at all. Let me know, see, this is what I mean. They're just like slimy little suckers and they slip right out of your hands. But do any of you guys do organic pears, and do you have the same issues with the toughness in those spots? Just curious. Now, this is the light simple syrup. I don't really feel like I need to use very much in these because the pears are super sweet at this point because they are ripe. And I don't know what I was thinking trying to shove that pear through my strainer. I tell you, like I said in the beginning of the video, I'm getting burnt out, and sometimes I start doing stuff and I'm like, oh, good grief, girl, just seriously focus. But my mom and my grandma always taught me when you do pears and peaches to make sure that the core center of the peach or pear is facing inward and you put the outside of the pear to the outside of the jar. If that really matters or not, I don't know, but that's the way we've always done it. And let me tell you what, I get nice little zings of heat on the back side of my fingers and my hand every time I'm stuffing them in here because these jars are so hot. So I kind of tuck them in there quickly and try to get them to go where I want them to go without touching the edge. But once I get them all filled up, and pears you can go up to a 1/2 inch of headspace, I have to wash my hands in between every one because they just get so gooey. But I'm going to add some more of my liquid, and then I'm going to take my, as I always call it, my handy dandy little plastic chopstick, and I'm going to debubble. And I always have to be really careful with pears because I don't want to stab and damage them. I want them to look as pretty as they can inside that jar. But once I've got that done, then I am going to take my damp paper towel, and it doesn't have to have vinegar or anything on it. I mean, you could if you want to, but at this point there's nothing greasy. It's just sticky potential. I'm going to get it wiped off, and then once I get it all nice and clean, I will put on my 4 jars canning lid. And again, these are pre-rinsed just to get off any factory debris that might be on there. Not that I ever see any, but it's just to be safe. Put my ring on finger tight, and then I'm going to take my jar lifter and get these put into the canner. And I am using my pressure canner, but I'm using it as a water bath, so I have all 7 in there, and this is what they looked like when they came out. Now the next day, I am overloaded with tomatoes, and again, this is because I was planning for a farm market, or a farm stand, but I am working today on making some enchilada sauce, and I really could have thrown all of the tomatoes in a pot and then just run them through my little sieve thing. But the problem is that I had discovered that a bunch of the tomatoes that I brought in to process, some of the aromas were not quite as ripe as the others. So again, I love squeezing their little bahooties and they just pop right out. Favorite thing about doing aromas is they're so easy to skin when the tomato is ripe enough. And this one I had to pull off the end because it wasn't quite ripe enough. But I just worked on getting these all deskinned, and then once I had them done, I chopped them all up and I put them into a large stock pot to cook down. And then I let these cook down for probably a couple hours. I had some other things that I needed to do, and then I ran them through my little old-fashioned sieve or strainer or whatever you want to call it. And hindsight, again, because I'm just getting very tired, I would have drained a good portion of the water off of the tomatoes first, but I didn't. So all of the juice sat here on the stove for about a day and a half before it cooked down to the consistency that I like to can it for the enchilada sauce. And you can see it's thick, but it's still got some run texture to it. So I am now mixing up my enchilada sauce seasoning. And this recipe calls for 6 teaspoons of chili powder, 2 teaspoons of cumin, 2 teaspoons of oregano, 2 teaspoons of garlic powder, 2 teaspoons of coriander, 1.5 teaspoons of seasoning salt. And then I'm going to get that all mixed together. And I lost the footage of filling the jars. I have no idea if I forgot to hit record or not, but once all the jars were filled, I added 2 tablespoons of lemon juice to the top and then used the chopstick to mix it in. So what I did was I added to the tomato sauce, I added a 1/4 cup of white vinegar, and then I added the spice blends, 2½ teaspoons of spice blends to each of the jars, and mix it in that way. And the recipe just calls to do it that way instead of adding it all to the sauce. Not sure why, but I guess it makes sure that each jar of sauce tastes the same. That's the way I've always done it. So I fill it half with the sauce, put the seasoning in, put the rest of the tomato sauce in, put the 2 tablespoons of lemon juice on the top, and then I take my chopstick and I stir it all together. And then I will take a little paper towel and I will wipe the rims. And again, then I will put my lid and my ring back on. And then I will get this loaded into the canner. And now this batch is supposed to make 6, but the tomatoes cooked down to the point where it only made 4. So again, I'm using my All-American 921 pressure canner, and just by lightly putting the lid on so that some air or some steam can escape, you can use it as a water bath canner as well. And this is how they looked when they came out. Nice and pretty and not too thick and not too runny. So I am down here with my little Pixie Crunch apple tree. If you have watched any of my previous videos, I talked about how my daughter picked this out for me when she worked at a farm store, and I didn't know what it was. As far as it had the tag on it, but I just didn't really know what a Pixie Crunch apple was. And this tree, last year it took a slight break, but I don't know if you can see this year, it's just loaded. And these little apples, let me grab one here. See if I can find one. Now overall, these apples aren't huge. You can kind of see it fits. I guess that's why they're Pixie. It's a dwarf tree. Let me wipe some of the lovely atmospheric dirt off of this apple, but see if you can hear just how absolutely crunchy they are. They're really crunchy, and they're semi-sweet. I wouldn't call them a super sweet apple, but they're definitely not tart either. And I'm just going to pick all these and bring them in to keep them from getting overripe. I'll probably juice some of them, and then the others I will store for fresh eating because they really are a good snack apple. And yes, I'm still crunching my apple. But see how I got 3 of them in my hand? It's kind of like the dwarf pear that we did the other week. They just are tiny. But I'm just going to work on getting those in my bucket. And then we will get them hauled in to store them until I'm ready to juice some of them. And as I was picking the tree, I picked about half of it. There were still some that didn't want to come off of the tree. So this is how cute they look sitting in the little container. And we'll just keep them like this till we're ready. Now the next day, I decided I was going to make some vegetable beef soup because I had so many odds and ends of produce after doing different canning recipes that I had left over. And this meat and the others that are on the counter, the local stores had some sales, and every time they do, I'll get it. Sometimes I'll stick it in the freezer or put it in the fridge, and within a week I'll try to get to it so that I can get it processed. And I am just taking this and slicing it into kind of like bite-sized chunks, I guess you'd say. They're not really delicate, but when, of course, they go through the pressure canner, they cook down and are a little bit more manageable. But again, I like to get as much fat off of the meat as possible before I start. And if you are interested, I will link down below. I did a completely separate video on canning ground beef and a video also on just canning beef like this in jars. And kind of the same principle applies here. I just really am a texture snob. I say that every video that I do something crazy like this, but I like to get all the fat off. And these are the green beans. I had canned a whole bunch of green beans, made dilly beans in the previous videos, and my plants are slowing way down, but I am still getting some here and there. I've been giving gallons away, and this week after I had given a bunch away, I probably had about a half a gallon worth. So I thought I would make this soup so that I could use these up. Again, I'm a chopper. I like to chop the ends off instead of snapping. But whatever works, right? I had a gal comment, and I thought that was really cute that she used her kitchen scissors to do it, and I thought I might try that one day, but I haven't done it yet. These are carrots. They're my spring carrots. I do a spring crop and a fall crop, and these are pretty much what was left of the spring. We stored them in the refrigerator, and sometimes they last longer than others. This time they were doing pretty good, but I had some that kind of were starting to get a little bit of root growth on them, which kind of grosses my daughter out. She won't eat them after they do that. So I figured I'd just get them chopped up and put into the soup. And the pieces might look rather large, but the one thing that drives me the craziest about carrots is they get mushy in the canner. Potatoes, I had a bunch of potatoes left over after doing the smashed potatoes. Now these are the smaller potatoes that I still had left. Isn't the purple potato so pretty? I just love it. And ones that maybe I accidentally stabbed or poked when I was digging them out, and they're the ones I want to get used up first. And the little ones, again, just because they tend to go soft the quickest. So this is about the tail end of my little ones, and I'm just going to work on getting those chopped. This is the corn that I had left over after I did a different recipe, and I had to go down and pick a few more to have enough for this soup. But what I'm going to do is put a little bit of broth in there, and I did a mixture of some homemade vegetable broth and some beef broth, and it is hot. It's boiling actually, and I put that into the bottom of a hot jar, and then I am cold packing, which cold packing you'll start with hot liquid, hot jar, and then you can put your cold ingredients. They're basically almost room temperature at this point, but I'm just measuring however I feel like doing. I'm not being specific. I'm just putting some meat in, putting some carrots in, grabbing a handful of beans or two and putting those in, and then I will grab some potatoes, and again, those aren't rotten potatoes in there. Those are the purple potatoes that you see. But then I will load some more potatoes in there, and then I will take my little scoop and I will put some corn in the top. And you might be looking at this going, oh my gosh, you're filling the whole jar with product. Where's your liquid going to go? Well, what I like to do is we prefer soups that are a little bit on the heartier side here. So what I will do is I will use more ingredients in the jar when I can it. And then when we take it out to eat it, if I want to thin it up and make it stretch further, if we have people over, or we want to eat it for dinner and then maybe have it for lunch the next day, we will add more broth at that time. And it's just kind of a way that I like to do it, because I use less jars while I'm canning than if I were to make it more of a liquid type soup from the beginning. So again, I'm going to take my chopstick and I am going to debubble so that we can get as much air out as possible. I am taking a vinegared paper towel since we have fatty product on the meat, using my pre-rinsed 4-jar canning lid and putting that on, and then getting my ring and putting it again on finger tight. And I will load this into the canner. I just think they look so pretty, all of those vegetables in there. But now my canner is hot, my water is hot, and see the purple potato on the side? So fun. You can fit 7 quarts into my All-American canner, so I got it fully loaded, and I actually ran 2 batches, and they process for 90 minutes, but it literally was an all-day project. The next day I had some things that I needed to do, and so it was just kind of a quick preservation project. I went out and got some of the volunteer dill that I had used also in my dilly beans, and these ones had already dried and gone to seed. So I just was carefully picking off the seeds, getting them all ready for my little jar, labeling it, and I'll get them packed in there. But that's a wrap for this week. Next week I know is going to be short. It's pretty much the end of the month, but there is one day on Sunday that I'll be filming. So I'll probably just do one more video with some preservation products and start adding in some of my regular content stuff out in the garden. So I hope that you'll subscribe and join me. And if so, we'll see you then. Thanks for hanging out.